Only mode.
Hi everyone, this is Chad Hill, and thank you for joining our second webinar of the month where we wanted to focus in on selling pay-per-click and social media programs. I also have Adam Stetzer on the phone here.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome.
Great, and today we're, like I said, going to spend some time just focused on selling and how we position these services to people that we talk to, and I'll let Adam kind of go through the meeting formalities in terms of asking questions.
Yeah, if you're new to our series, you have a window on your right where you can ask questions, and I monitor the chat windows while Chad runs through the slides, and I'll pass those questions up to him.
Thanks. So let's go ahead and get started here. So I wanted to start with pay-per-click, and then we'll circle back and talk at the end about social media, and then there's the hybrid of the two where there's social media, paid search, or advertising. So, but to start off, we're going to talk about the top pay-per-click platforms, and the line here shows that what used to be 3 is now 2. We continue to see that Google AdWords is really the primary driver of paid search traffic. They by far have the highest search volume, and even though the market share of search engines may be a little different than the 90%, we still find that in most of our client campaigns that we're getting the bulk of our paid search clicks from Google, over 90%, so that this is still the 800-pound gorilla here. But with that, the size of their network also means that there's a lot more competition in AdWords than there was even a few years ago. So they have the greatest share of eyeballs and impressions, but they also have the most number of people and competitors bidding. As I mentioned, in addition to the traditional search network, which is what all of us think of as going to google.com and searching for a result and seeing paid search results at the top or the right-hand side of the screen, they also have by far the best display network, which would be the contextual ads, either text ads on other people's websites as well as display advertising, and then more recently have used that placement to build some very nice retargeting tools. Retargeting, just for those of you who are new to this, is where you have the ability to build your own audience using some Google technology. So what you do is you place a retargeting pixel, piece of JavaScript snippet on your website, and then anyone who comes to your website is added to your unique audience, and then you have the ability to then advertise to that audience as they move across the web. So I'm sure many of us have seen this, where you go to a website and maybe you add something to your shopping cart. The e-tail guys are pretty far ahead on the curve on this retargeting process, but then you're checking your Yahoo Mail, or you're on the New York Times website, and you'll notice that same company is advertising to you, and in some cases the ads they're using are so smart that they actually remember what you actually put in your shopping cart or what you viewed on your visit to their site. So if you dumb that down to what most of the small to medium-sized businesses out there could handle, it still is very useful. Maybe not to the point of knowing what page you are on, but it is very useful to know that if you drive 100 people to your website, we all know that we're really lucky if we're getting 10% of them, maybe even 5% of them, to fill out a contact form or call. But that other 90% leave your website and don't really leave much information behind for you to try to nurture or get them back. So this retargeting is great because it gives you the ability to key into that audience and sort of stay in touch with them as they continue their journey around the web, looking for potentially at other competitors' services, or maybe just get distracted and don't remember that they were looking for the widget that you were selling or whatever that service might be. So this is a great technology.
Does this explain why I see SEO ads no matter where I go on the internet today?
That's probably, is this for you personally, Adam? Yeah,
for me personally, and as a consumer, it's actually a little startling. I find it a little bit because I will be on a site that has nothing to do with SEO, and boom, there's an ad, maybe even ours with a competitor. But I will say it does reinforce the brand. So it's probably startling to me because I'm pretty used to the fact that most ads are contextual, and some of these jump out on sites that aren't at all about SEO. But I do see those brands reinforced over and over again. So I think it's probably effective.
I agree, and not to go too far into retargeting, but then there's sort of a between you. I guess to answer that question directly about is it because you've been to a person's site or whether a site somebody else in the market has assigned you to a behavioral segment as someone who's interested in SEO. It's sometimes a little hard to tell, but and I think that's what's really interesting. On some of this retargeting right now is that there are, in addition to retargeting and building your own audience, there are other, and Google has some, they have now groups they have their own behavioral segments as well as other ways that you can try to find people that fit into certain groups. So because, Adam, you've been to 3 or 4 websites about SEO, it could be that there's actually a third-party data source out there that's assigned you to it. So it's exciting and interesting, and I'm sure this will continue to develop over the next weeks, months, and years. So on the other side of this, if you're back in the traditional search network side of things, Yahoo and Bing merged together, finalized it I think at the end of it's been actually a little over a year, but now using Google or Microsoft Ad Center, you can place ads on both the Microsoft properties, including Bing and MSN, as well as the Yahoo search results. And so they definitely have a much lower amount of less share of the search world, but they're trying to hold on to their market, and they've done some things that I think are very smart that Google did a long time ago. But one of the things that especially for the little advertisers is the ability to advertise against other branded terms. So we have some clients, actually we have clients on both sides of this. We have some clients who have the brand and really hate the fact that in Google little no-name companies can advertise against them when they're out spending millions of dollars to build their brand. But we also have clients on the flip side of that who are competing against the big guy, and they're able to advertise their service for someone who, when people are searching for that brand, and sometimes it's the actual name of the company, but sometimes it's how the Kleenex example, people call facial tissues Kleenex, and so someone could be searching on the category that's so well associated with a brand that it's important to be able to put your message out in front of people searching for that type of brand. So they've recently opened up the ability to search for branded terms, or to advertise on branded terms, which I think was a great move, and they should have done it a long time ago. Some other benefits is that it's generally less competitive than AdWords, meaning that because of their lower search volume, a lot of people sort of stop once they're in AdWords and don't really take the time to manage an Ad Center account. And that is certainly, we do that often because the reality is that if a client comes to us with a couple $100 budget, it doesn't really make sense to try to manage it on 2 platforms, because just from a pure hours required to do it, we'd have to charge them more to manage an account on 2 platforms than we would just to most effectively sort of deploy their budget in AdWords. And like I said, so that usually makes Yahoo being a supplement to an AdWords campaign. And again, just to reiterate this, we always start with Google because of its position in the market, that it is, for the most part, it has near dominance on the pay-per-click side of things, but we do add other networks as budget and business needs necessitate. Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to talk about heading towards how do you sell this is bidding on keywords. And in most cases, we are bidding on a cost per click basis when we're working with the small to medium-sized business. And what that means is that we're putting out, again, I'm sort of going to start pretty basic here, and we'll move into some more advanced topics, but there may be some people here who have not actually managed or tried AdWords. But when you set your bid, and let's just call it for the term plumber in Washington, D.C., I may say I'm willing to pay up to $5 for that particular phrase when someone searches for it. What happens is that at the moment someone out there searches for plumbers in Falls Church or in Washington, D.C., Google immediately pulls together everyone who's expressed an interest in that term and says, what's everyone willing to pay? And then to avoid overcomplicating it, it's what you're willing to pay times your quality score, sort of a multiplier factor, which comes primarily through historical click-through rate and some other factors that go into how good of an advertiser you've been in the past and you are currently. But those are all put together, and then Google decides who gets the first spot, second spot, third spot on down the page. When someone actually clicks on your ad, you're basically paying, so let's say you get position 2. The way that the cost per click bidding works is that I may have said I was willing to spend up to $5 for that click. But if the guy below me was only willing to spend $4, I don't have to pay my full $5. I pay a penny or so more than what the guy below me was effectively bidding. So that's why a lot of times you'll see that you're willing to pay up to $5, but you're not actually hitting that amount because the person below you there was some gap between your bid or their bid and your bid. Now, a lot of people believe that those gaps they're still what they call sort of some gap between those bids. I think they're a lot lower than. It's almost like the difference between the person above you and below you is very small. So a lot of times your max CPC is pretty close to what you're actually paying because the guy right below you is just neck and neck with you in terms of who is going to get the slot that you got versus the one below it. Now, just before going to the next slide, I will say there are some other bidding options that we have in many campaigns. One of the ones that we've been pushing more and more of our paid search accounts towards is a cost per action bidding. And what you do there is you actually, by adding tracking tags to the client's website, you can tell Google, in this case primarily, that you're willing to pay up to, let's just say, $50 for anyone who completes a certain conversion. So that may be a lead, lead completion on your website. So we'll pay up to $50 for anyone who completes a lead form. And then what that does is give Google, a lot more latitude in trying to figure out how do they optimize what you're bidding. And ideally what that means, or what that in reality means, is that they're able to find the keywords that are more likely to lead to a conversion and bid more on those and bid less on the ones that have historically not led to conversions. And so then by managing what your maximum CPA is, your cost per action, you can get more efficiency out of the account and optimize it. So that's another interesting place that we've been working on with many of our clients. One final thing on CPA is that a lot of times on small accounts, so if we're dealing with a client that has $500 or something relatively small, it does require that there's a pretty consistent number of conversions coming in. So if, I think that number is, 10 in a couple week period, and it seems to change a little bit depending on the account, but you do have to be an account that has pretty consistent lead flow and not just the onesie and twosies, or as you can imagine, the sample size isn't really big enough for Google's algorithms to sort of figure out which keywords convert and which ones don't, since it probably looks a lot like luck. Okay, so on to the fun stuff, which is what kinds of questions do we often get when trying to figure out the budget? So you sort of figure out, you're able to talk about, hey, Google, this is where your ad can be. It's great because you can put your credit card in and we can have you up with ads almost immediately. You can explain the way there's a bidding around CPC, but the minute you get into budgets, these are the questions we start to hear. And these are my favorite questions. So how much does it take to own my keywords? Well, own is one of those really difficult terms because you don't own anything on the web pretty much at all in any place that you are, and especially you don't own. It's not like a billboard where you own or know your billboard's always going to be on the side of the highway for the amount of time that you've paid for it. Given that this is an auction, you have to kind of start to change people's mindsets because what they are in position 1 for today may be different tomorrow when their competitors get mad that they're no longer in position 1 and bid things up. So you have to just make sure that whenever people start talking about own, you need to sort of sit people down and say, let's kind of set some expectations here because this is a signal that we're going to have some problems in about 30 to 60 days if we're talking about owning keywords because you just don't own them. So that's one thing that we get questions on. Another one that often comes up, and I wish there was a better answer to this one, is how many searches are there for keyword X in my market? Followed on by how much does that, or how much do those clicks cost per click? What is the cost per click? So unfortunately, Google for a while had a tool that allowed you to try to estimate clicks by market, and that was usually down at either the metro market level or sometimes you could get into city by city. I always found it terribly inaccurate. Almost in all cases when I used it, I was horribly wrong in terms of, or it was horribly wrong in terms of how many clicks there really were and what the real cost per click was. And I believe that they must have gotten the same feedback because they took that feature away. It's also probably been about a year since they took that away when they introduced their new keyword tool that is now what's if you search for keyword tool on Google, you'll see that that's what pops up. When they brought up that new service, they retired the ability to look by market. So this one's a really tough one. What we try to do is, again, we'll talk in a second about how to flip this conversation around, but that is a tough one that is sometimes hard to answer. The other one is how much does it cost per click? Now you can get an estimate from Google's keyword tool still on the estimated cost per click. I almost always double that because what I've again found is that it seems to be lower than what the real market, what's really happening in AdWords, and that's exacerbated by the fact that usually a new advertiser's quality score is lower than someone who's been bidding on keywords for a long time. So a new advertiser coming in is going to take a little bit of a hit on what they have to bid to be competitive in the positions compared to someone who's been around for and has a higher quality score and has been around for quite a while. So I typically double those numbers. And again, it's something that you will get this question. The next one that we often get is, so if you're telling me it costs $4, does that mean I'll always be in position 1? Which kind of gets right back to the auction thing, which is that no, this is a dynamic market. Today there could be 10 bidders, tomorrow there could be 20, the next day there could be 5. So $4 more than likely will get different results every day, depending on a number of factors that are completely outside of the control of a bidder in an AdWords auction. So what we'd like to do is kind of flip the conversation around.
Question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you think that what Google's showing you needs to be doubled. There's a question that came in on the chat window that said, are you seeing that the cost is usually double for the top spots or for any placement?
Well, so that's a good question. I don't know if I have a specific answer of what position it leads to. Technically, that bid is supposed to be for the top 1 to 3 spot. And what I think I found is that to really get the 1 to 3 spot, I just usually double it. And again, this is kind of part of the estimate. We're estimating at this point because we're sort of going into putting together a proposal, maybe talking to a client about it. If we can, having a real account up and running we can certainly test that very quickly to get the real answer. This is just usually before someone has said, yes, let's move forward. I want to move forward with an AdWords account, that you're in this kind of estimate phase. So I usually double it to try to get in that 1 to 3. It's not to say that if you use their number, you wouldn't maybe be lower on the page, but I typically double it. And that's just my again, what I've done, because I have found that we've seen problems where we'll come in saying that you should be able to get 300 clicks at $2 because we're using that from AdWords, from the AdWords tool, and what really happens is it's really costing us $4. So I just like to be cautious, and if it goes the other way, we're like, well, hey, look, we caught a break, and we now have more clicks than we thought.
Right. You'd rather be wrong on that side. So that makes sense.
Okay, so flipping the conversation around, what a lot of times, and this comes from many cases of people saying, what should my budget be for, how much paid search do I need? So what I like to do is to sort of flip it around and say, well, how many customers do you need from this program? So a lot of times people are saying, well, I was doing yellow pages and I was getting, well, I don't know what I was getting, but maybe I was getting 10 new customers a month off my yellow pages. So okay, great, that's 10 new customers. And then the next question, we're trying to kind of drive through to how many clicks do we need, but for how many calls does it take to get a new customer? And most people, my experience is that, and probably the same for a lot of people on the phone here, is that most people sort of have well, it depends on the person. A small business almost always kind of overestimates their close rate, which is helpful in this calculation because it kind of, the math works out better. But a lot of times people will say, hey, look, I close half of the calls I get. Now, a lot of times that may or may not be true, but for the purpose of getting through to a budget, that's going to be useful. If you're working with a bigger client who really has some truly historical data, it could be that those conversion rates are a lot lower, especially also if you're dealing with people looking for online sales or e-commerce or lead gen. Those numbers could be lower. But in this case, my example, so if someone needs 10 new customers and they close half of the customers, the prospects that call them, that means they need 20 calls in a month to hit their goal. And I just use this as an average that we've seen in various places. But if the average service business website, typically a person going to service business website has a pretty high intent to call, is between 5 and 10%. That means you'll need about 200 clicks using the 10% conversion rate to hit your goal. So 200 clicks, 20 calls, 50% of those calls turn into customers, 10 new customers. So if I then go into the AdWords keyword tool and pull out my estimate of, let's just say it's $2 and I double it, or I decide to be overly optimistic and just use the number and it's $4, I could then estimate that this client's going to need about an $800 budget to get their 10 new customers a month. So that's how this model works. Now I've illustrated something here that I've done for some clients where what I've done is sort of put together a couple of different scenarios, and again, this kind of takes some of the pressure off of us committing to a specific number, because a lot of times you're working with a client, and one of the biggest factors and leverage points in this thing is what is really the conversion rate of a click to a call or a lead completion, and then what is the conversion rate from that lead completion to a customer. So I like to put together sort of this mix to say, look, it could be as good and as low as basically essentially as good as 10 leads, $50 a lead, and it could be as bad as $100 a lead, depending on these different scenarios. So what I've done here is basically gone through and said, if you had a $5 CPC and a $5 conversion rate, that's going to roughly lead to $100 per lead in this case. And then I've gone through and estimated a $10 cost per click with a 5% conversion rate, and then on down the list here. So I guess the best case scenario on this list is that, you know, your website would convert at 12.5%, and you had a $5 cost per click. That means you're getting $40 leads. So that is the first kind of part of the scenario analysis here. The second part that I've included below is then taking some of those numbers, and I think I plugged in the 50 and the 87.5 and the $100 lead number, and then said, how many leads a month do you need? If you need 10, then we need $500 in budget. If you need 50, then we need $2,500 a month in budget if you have a $50 lead. So that gives the client some ability to sort of buy in and own this model, because if at the end of month one we come back and we run this campaign and we spend $1,000 and they only get, let's just say, 5 leads or 10 leads, then we can go back and say, well, what broke down? Was it, and I'll tell you, in most cases it's going to be website conversion rate, because typically the websites that we start with in a lot of cases just aren't optimized for conversion. They don't have a clear, strong call to action. So we can come back and say, well, you know, we talked about this, and you really felt your conversion rate was going to be 10% on your website, and because you don't have the phone number anywhere on it, it was 1.5%. So your cost per lead was $333. And so that's the perfect place to then go back and say, all right, well, what can we do? Because we know we want to get to the $50 lead. So, you know, we've got a ways to go, but what can we do to get your conversion rate up from 1.5 to 10%? And that's really helps to have that early on in the sales process, because, like I said, I can tell you that in most cases, people's websites just aren't set up for conversion. And I know many of you, again, on the phone are in the business of helping people get their website set up for conversion. But if you've got to have this sort of approach here where you have something to fall back on when in the first month you don't hit the goals that they wanted.
Yeah, Chad, I really like how you've laid this out. I mean, I'm a numbers guy, so this I think is really, really helpful. I guess I heard you say that people are overconfident in the performance of their website, just like they are in their ability to close. I mean, do you think there's an analogy there? They think they close a lot more business that calls them. You think they're just as overconfident in how their website performs?
I think so. I think people sort of underestimate. I was talking to a client last week, and you know, we were looking at their website and looking at pretty much this same analysis. I mean, the numbers were a little different, cost per click and conversion rates, but looking at the same analysis, the biggest issue was that, you know, in their case, I don't think we really even had any leads after the first 30 days. And I, you know, asked them the questions, went through like, well, what are we trying to get people to do on the website? And you know, they went through this very, you know, well, here's why we're different. And they went through and they gave me all these reasons. And I said, okay, guys, I heard you say that you're different because of these 3 things. Let's go to the home page. Where does it say that those are, first of all, where does it say any of those 3 things? And secondly, even if it did, what action, what do you want people to do? To me, it looks like you know, you want people to, well, I'm not even sure. Like there's just a hodgepodge of links and buttons and various things on your website. So I do think that people tend to underestimate their website's ability to close, which, as you can see in paid search programs, is such a key driver to whether or not someone's happy or not happy with the results. So that's why we do landing pages in a lot of cases. I know a lot of you do graphic design and websites, but even a pretty website that doesn't have a call to action can fail. So you have to have a strong call to action.
Yeah, and actually we've got an interesting couple of questions coming in, Chad. One is if I give our PPC customers the bad news that they aren't getting conversions, and then tell them that we can help them by optimizing and or redesigning the website, they might get the impression that we're just trying to sell them something more and question our credibility. Is there any way that you could suggest how to handle this in a more positive way?
Yeah, I almost always put into, well, so I think there's always a little bit of upfront in your proposal or your discussions, sort of talking about that up front to say, we always recommend some type of, a couple of things. If there's any historical data around something they've pulled from Google Analytics, or you can get access to Google Analytics or any other data, it might be that you can tell them immediately that their conversion rate is going to put them in the wrong quadrant of this kind of lead generation model. And so before even starting the program, we need to undertake a program to get that conversion rate up. So those are the ones that are easy because you can pretty much, you don't even have to, you can have the same model because you want to sort of be able to say, well, look, it could get better if you could get it to 8% or 10%, but you know that they're actually not even, there's no chance they're in the upper range there. So start there, and if you can do it, tell them where they are and tell them that they may need to do some work before even the campaign starts. The other thing I always do is almost in all cases, if I don't know it and there's no historical data, which usually is a pretty good indicator that it's going to be bad, because it means they haven't been measuring anything in the first place, I usually include in a proposal some part of a landing page or conversion optimization project, and some people buy it and we start with that. Other people say, no, I just want to do the paid search, and so then if needed, I can go back to the proposal and say, well, remember we talked about you needing this, and we did it for 30 days, and you need it. So that's what I usually try to do, is because I can usually see these kinds of things up front, and I like to just make sure I disclose it so that it isn't about. And the other thing to add to this is that the first 30 days of a campaign are never exactly where you want them to be, even if the conversion rate was awesome, because it means there will inevitably be some keywords that weren't the best keywords and converted lower than you wanted. So this is always a journey. The second month, the third month is always better than the first month, and that's just kind of how this works. So I don't know. Did that answer the question?
I think it did. Another one that's good here, this example you have up, Chad, makes a lot of sense for people who are spending tens of thousands of dollars on PPC. In your experience, does this kind of complex mathematical presentation resonate with small business owners?
Well, I think you can adapt it to the audience. So maybe this is a little more complicated than you need, but I think if you go back to the questions, you can also make it more of a more paragraph format, and do that as well. So I think you have to know your audience. There are some people that probably it would work great on, and some people it wouldn't. I remember showing something like this to a fairly unsophisticated smaller business guy about, and this guy actually was pumping a lot of money into paid search, but he was pumping it into paid search, and I think he had spent $1,100 on his website like 6 years ago. So it was actually pretty effective for whatever reason, but I said, look, you're asking us to drive to get your cost per lead down. I don't even have to look any further than at your website and what you spent on it versus what you're spending on paid search to tell you that you should take $5,000 and redo it, and you'll be able to move up the curve on conversion rate or move up on conversion rate, and everything else will fall in line. So, I think it's the audience, but some people probably won't get it. Some people probably will.
Yeah, and I wouldn't underestimate the small business owner either. I guess my answer is, they know what their customers are worth to them. A lot of them know really well. A lot of these guys know the numbers right off the top of their head. I mean, Chad, we always joke whenever I get in the taxi cab to go to the airport here in Rochester to fly out to the DC office, my cab driver, he advertises in AdWords, and he knows his numbers, and he knows how much he spends with Google and how many fares he gets per month out of it. So I think Chad's right, you have to know the audience, but I wouldn't underestimate them. And I think if you present this and they're not getting it, part of that may just be lack of experience or time to work it out this way. They really should be looking at it this way, because these are the factors. Last question for you, Chad, before we let you move on, is could you guys do this same sort of example, which is really, really helpful, to help us have some sort of formula for SEO costs?
Yeah, we have in the past done tried to estimate the trying to think, Adam, what we've done on this. I mean, certainly one of the things we look at is we know the cost of the traffic. So if you were to be able to figure out the cost of in the long run, the cost that you're saving on paid search by going with SEO, we've been able to show several of our larger clients, that, hey, this investment you made last year in SEO, this year, every month, you're basically paying for the entire cost of that project last year, just by the amount of traffic you're getting. So the issue with I think the only issue with trying to calculate that way, and I'll let Adam take a swing at this one as well, is that a lot of times it's the time horizon that you're playing with on SEO, whereas this is a much more closed-loop system. You spend in 30 days, you spend this amount of money, and you expect to get back in those same 30 days a certain number of leads, because it's basically they click and sign up or they don't. There's not really much of a tail on a paid search click. So that's, I think, the only problem with, or the only trick with trying to estimate it that way. But Adam, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I think you hit on the head. As you were talking, I was thinking the real issue is time. I mean, the question sort of is, what is the half-life of your SEO result? And the answer to that, honestly, depends on a lot of factors. How competitive the keyword is, how strongly the competitors on page one are fighting back after you've taken over a top ranking. So, and many things that we'll just never know because they're buried deep in the Google algorithms. So it is complex. It's a great question, though. I mean, Chet and I talk about it all the time, and sure, wouldn't it be really helpful? So I think we're going to continue to think about it, and if you've got ideas, of course, we want to hear them too.
Yeah. Okay, I will continue then. So we touched on some of this stuff, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about how to determine if any of your clients are good candidates for pay-per-click. And I think the last page we showed some bigger budgets, but I would actually consider a lot of these, and I hope I don't offend anyone by saying, but there is a budget on this page where it's $500. I think if someone's budget's much lower than $500, we did roll out the PPC launch program, which was really focused on those sort of ultra low budgets where we'll set the thing up for them and just give them a little traffic, just accelerate some traffic to their website. But anyone who's getting into measuring goals and trying to track a cost per lead is spending at least $500 a month, and then obviously up from there. So when we're talking about the smaller business, we always say, like, in most cases we've already done keyword research, and the launch program that we came out with, where basically we'll just set up a real simple campaign. What we do is we actually use the keywords that you've already selected for the SEO campaign if the client's already on SEO, and we just we start with those because we know there's at least some traffic. There's traffic on those terms, and they're relevant to the business, and so we run with it on that. But of course, you can look at other services. The nice thing about pay-per-click is that if a business was adding a new product line and they were well positioned in SEO or working on improving their position in SEO on one service they provided, but they were rolling out. We work with a HVAC plumber, and they've been doing a lot of paid search for their plumbing services for a long time, but nothing really on HVAC, and they're well positioned from an SEO standpoint on plumbing, but not HVAC. They wanted to launch a quick pay-per-click program with HVAC, so it gives you the ability to try something new quickly. That's one idea. The other idea is that in addition to the people searching for a product, especially for some of our clients who are trying to kind of generate some demand and get new people to even be aware of what they do, the Google Display Network is just a great way of, with very little sort of cost involved. I mean, it used to be that to get a display ad out, you had to have at least a $10,000 or $20,000 a month budget. But now with the Google Display Network, you can have display ads running on relevant sites for, again, as little as a couple $100s a month. So it's a great way to sort of supplement SEO, because whereas SEO is all about capturing existing demand when someone searches for a specific product, they see your your website link and they click on it, display network especially is all about putting your message on contextual sites or contextually relevant sites so that you actually can generate a little awareness and get people to see something that they didn't even know to go search for. So that's a great way of using it. Okay, so talking a little bit about how the small budget business or small business can compete, and certainly one of the things is long tail keywords, and this is the same as SEO, so this is really nothing. This is nothing different. But someone who is more micro focused on a specific geography has the ability and knows that their client is in that geography, can really get more focused from ad copy, from their whole website being about that area, and so it allows you to go after those longer tail keywords and maybe compete with a national company who isn't quite as localized as you can be. I mentioned the display network, but generally speaking, the clicks there are less expensive, and was for a long time this sort of stigma that you should always just turn off the Google display network because everything that happened there was bad. That's not so much the case, but I think a lot of people do misuse the Google display network. I'd say the number one account setup issue that we see when a small business comes to us is they're like, I'm spending $1,000 a month on Google and I'm not getting anything. We log into that account, and I'd say 7 out of 10 times they're spending 75% or more of their budget on the Google display network. And the reason that it's not working for them is that they're not managing that. They're bidding the same amount they are for the search network. They're not looking at the sites that are getting getting traffic and clicks for them, and they tend to be the bad sites. So if properly managed, it's a great place to get lower cost per click terms. They may not convert quite as often, but again, if you do the math on that, if your costs are 25% of a click on the search network, and conversion rate's half, you're still out ahead in terms of your cost per conversion. So that's how we use display network with smaller budgets. And then we did talk about the remarketing campaigns. It's just another great way of keeping in touch with people and nurturing people so that you can bring them back. And by the way, that traffic can be traffic that comes to your site through any means. So we do have some clients who, for example, do print advertising, and they create their own retargeting segment for traffic that comes to their website. They tend to advertise a different URL, so then it takes them to a special page. We actually have an audience for some of these clients where it's just their print advertising list that they can then retarget to it. So in some ways, retargeting almost becomes like email marketing, where you can have multiple lists and you can have different ads going to different lists depending on where they've come on your website. So it's a pretty neat option. So I want to talk a minute about how some of the advantages that working with us that you can, because you're outsourcing to us, talk about with people you're selling to. The first one is that all of our analysts that work on these accounts are AdWords certified, and then HubShot as a company is AdWords certified. But again, you may not want to take the leap to say we're an AdWords certified company, but you can at least say that every one of the analysts who's going to work on this is an AdWords certified, has been AdWords certified. And again, that's it. It does take something to get that certification. You have to study. You have to be pretty familiar with AdWords and the way that paid search advertising works in order to get that certification. And it also gives everyone just a comfort level that the people working on their accounts know how to operate the system. The other thing is that our system, that our whole process is driven around setting a goal on the campaign, and then the client and you work to help set the goal, whether that be a conversion goal, 10 phone calls a month or 10 web form completions a month. And then our analysts, the way we run our analyst team is that we assign a daily score to our analysts based on how close they are to hitting that goal and how close they are to the budget, whether it be we project it for the month every day, that if things continue as of the today, the 29th of the month, that we predict by the end of tomorrow the person will be the account will have spent this, and the number of conversions will be this, and so we assign our analyst a number, a score, and then we basically, as the management team, manage the team to make sure that any place where there's an account that's not trending in the right direction or is maybe below the score we're shooting for, we're working with them to modify and manage that account. Now, what that really forces us to do is to communicate with the client, with you, and then you with the client, because there are cases where we're not hitting the goal because the goal is unrealistic. So if you come in and say, back to our slide here from a couple slides ago, if you came to us and said, hey, look, I'm predicting I don't know what, I need 30 leads and I'm going to give you $500 a month. Well, when we plug all our numbers in, we look at cost per click, and we maybe even, if we don't catch it initially, but we let the campaign start running with those goals, you're going to hear from us pretty quickly that, hey, you sort of plugged in these numbers. From what we can tell, the conversion rate is way lower than what is required. So we're going to need to modify this goal. Now, it's not to say that we can't over time work towards getting to that goal, but these are the factors that need to be addressed in order to get there. And one of them is that I can't get you a low enough cost per click this month to ever get the cost per lead to where you need it to be to hit your goal. So that forces us to communicate with you, and then assuming you communicate with the client, we can adjust the goals, and then our analysts can, they want to make as good a score as possible, and they focus then on managing that account. The other thing you can, of course, talk about is how all of our data is reported in your dashboard. So this is something that, when you're out in the market and some of your clients might be using Yodel or Reach Local or other platforms out there, you actually can, talk about a lot of both of them use their software as a major selling point. You now have software as your own selling point. So you can talk about the dashboard and on the paid search tab, how you can keep a daily view of how much you've spent, top keywords, what actions have been performed on your account. You can even get information about phone calls and web lead completions. So all that information is presented to you right in the dashboard for your client and for your own information. So that's something that we would really recommend selling and using examples of it, so that your client says, hey, yeah, this is what I need. I need something where I can track all this stuff in the same place.
Chad, we do have a question about data tracking coming in here. Can you explain how your phone tracking script works? Does it integrate with the conversions you're showing on this slide here? If so, how does it work in conjunction with other phone numbers on the site? Does it swap them out, etc.?
Yeah, it's a great question. So our phone tracking script, there's really three parts to our phone tracking service. One is issuing a tracking number, and all calls to that number are then we're able to pull those into our dashboard. Some people take that number and they actually put it on, if it's a landing page that the only traffic ever going to it's going to be paid search. They don't even need to worry about dynamically changing the number. They can just put the phone number on there, and anyone who goes to that page is going to see the phone number and call that number, and then we're pretty certain that because that wasn't a public web page, it was just something for paid search, that we know that was a paid search visit. When you do actually want to manage the phone number, we have a JavaScript snippet that you place in the footer of your website. And what that snippet does is every time someone comes to the website, it looks at the referrer and or looks at the destination, the inbound URL for a parameter in the URL. So we can kind of train through this, but to make it simple, it looks at where the traffic's coming from, and then it goes and looks at a set of rules that you can define in our dashboard. And you can set rules either by refer, so that anyone coming from Google or LinkedIn or Facebook, whatever it might be, you can set a rule that says, if the person comes from this location, go look for this number and change it to this number. And it's essentially a rewrite. And if you watch very closely, you can actually see it sometimes happen, where the page will load, and then right as it's finished loading, you'll see the number just swap out. And that's a piece of JavaScript on our side that you can just place on the client's website, and it will swap things out. It's been white labeled so that you can use the URL you use is the same as your portal URL. So it would be, for example, reports.resellerdomain.com / and then a name of a campaign ID, so we can refer to the right script. So that's the second component. And then the third component is then on our dashboard and on the screen here that you're looking at. We look at we can associate a medium with each phone number. So when we set that phone number up for reporting purposes, we can tell our dashboard that it's a organic phone number or it's being used for paid search. And then depending on which screen you're looking at, you'll see this number. So for example, this particular screen, if you had organic numbers and paid search numbers, this total conversions would only show the paid search phone numbers.
Cool. And then a follow-up question came in while you were talking, Chad, which is, does the HubShout phone script rewrite affect styling?
No, it doesn't. Typically, what we recommend, it has two modes, and this is you can talk to your account manager about using this, but there's a global mode and a div specific mode. And what we do is it's pretty literal. It essentially just what we usually recommend is to use the div specific mode because it's the more sort of precise, and it has less potential issues of contending with some other script you might be running on the website. But what all it's doing is it's just looking inside a div ID, and it's basically looking for a piece of text and just swapping out that text. So whatever CSS formatting you had associated with that div or some other part of the web page that it's on would carry over. Okay.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. So just we've got a few minutes left here. So basically the other thing then you can do is we can also talk about landing pages. So a lot of times I mentioned before that it's nice to mention landing pages, and because it is important with paid search to be able to measure the performance and to increase that conversion rate. Okay, moving on to social media pay-per-click. So the main difference between a Google pay-per-click campaign and like a Facebook pay-per-click campaign is that instead of targeting based on keywords, you're primarily targeting based on the information that people express or provide in Facebook, which is some demographic information, it's some geographic information, and then there's behavioral information based on the likes and interests you have as you like things across Facebook. And so we have the ability, you can't necessarily target company Facebook pages, but typically groups that are out there where people have joined various groups in Facebook, you can actually target people who have said, I like this group, or I'm interested in this group. And then you can overlay that and say, like we had an event we were targeting for somebody down in Atlanta where we could say, we're looking for people that are within 50 miles of Atlanta, are female, age, I think we did, 20 to 40, and who have, and then we had a list of like 30 different groups we had found, but primarily were cooking and entertaining related groups who have expressed interest in these. And so that created an audience, and then we could put our ad up and target them. The other big thing with Facebook is you have two choices about where to send the traffic. You can either send the traffic back to your website or any URL you want, or you can send it to your Facebook page and to a specific tab for that matter. And what we found in general is that if you're looking to sort of, depending on your goal, we found that sending traffic to a Facebook page, you're going to get a higher conversion rate, if you will, if you consider a conversion. but a lot of times that's not as an immediate it doesn't immediately turn into revenue. So for a couple of our direct response advertisers, we've tried sending them to landing pages on their main website, and no one ever really converts. So we've tried an email form on their main website. That gets a little better conversion rate. And we've also tried just getting people to like their page on Facebook, which enables some other nurturing capabilities, because when someone has liked your page on Facebook, you can now send them emails and do other things to kind of message to them inside Facebook, and that is useful for some cases. But what we found is that for some of our more of our direct response advertisers, there's just not as immediate conversion to a sale. But if you can get those likes cheap enough and you have ways to convert them through nurturing and other things you're doing in Facebook, it still may make sense. Okay, we have just a few minutes, so I'm going to spend 1 minute talking about away from advertising for a second and just talk about some of the social media management programs that we've developed. Essentially, what we've been asked to do is we have a lot of clients, both through resellers and a few that are direct, who have come to us saying, I need to do something on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I just don't know what to do, and can you guys come up with some plan or some way of helping me just do the core part of it? I don't want to hire someone to do this. I just need some presence and some ongoing effort on these social networks. So what we did is we looked at different ways to accomplish that task, and what we came up with and what we've been doing is we are essentially creating for clients one piece of one small blog a week based on an editorial calendar that we've created with them. That goes on their website, assuming they have a blog, and we essentially take the effort to hook up that blog to, essentially to Facebook, to LinkedIn, anyone that enables like an RSS feed, where we can actually say anything posted on the blog automatically gets sort of posted out on these other social networks. The other thing we do is we then tweet that we just blogged, and there's some automated tweeting platforms, but we just take the new blog post and tweet it. And then what we do, so we do that once a week. That gets us exposure of some custom proprietary content once a week going out on these different platforms, social networks. The other thing we do is then we find some shareable content, so content that other people have written, and then we tweet that, also post that on the Facebook page, and the same thing in LinkedIn if you hook it up to Twitter. And so we're getting some sharing going on. So we've done some of our own proprietary content. Here's our message, it's been curated by us. Here's some sharing content. And then on Twitter, because it's really the primary one where you can try to kind of build your own following, we also once a week will go out and try to find some people talking about similar topics, and then maybe talk to them, send them a message where hopefully if they're looking at their mentions, they'll see that someone has mentioned them, and then the goal then is that if they look at our own Twitter effort, that they'll follow, and then that sort of drives some building of the following in the community. So that is the program we're running, and what it allows us to do is if you look at our social mention tab that we have now, you're going to see a nice spike in the number of mentions that are going out about the business, because we're putting stuff on Facebook, Twitter, some of that's getting published out to other social networks. And so if the goal is, hey, look, we just need to get some more presence in social media, this program is great at doing that, because it's doing all the things that drive more mentions and engagement and presence on the social networks. We're doing this for $249 a month, which is an absolute steal. In most cases, we believe it'll be being done in conjunction with some other programs, so the account manager can work with you on it. But this is a great program that we'd love it if more of you guys would start talking to us about it and selling. We've developed a couple pieces of marketing collateral for it, and you can talk to your account manager about getting that. And we see this as a very important part of our our ongoing set of services that we're delivering. We see this as a growing part of that in the next 6 months and year.
Chad, as you were talking, literally 3 people typed in, how much is this thing going to cost? A couple of follow-ups on that. Are you quoting the reseller's cost there?
That is, actually, I believe that the reseller cost on that is $199. But I have to confirm that. Yeah, I'll have to confirm that actually afterwards. I need to look at my price sheet.
Okay, and regardless, I think it's a very good deal too, and I think we want to stress it may not stay this low forever, but as before, when we have had to adjust prices, we've always grandfathered folks in to not sting them with a price change. So take advantage of this while it's out, because it's our current reseller published rate, and it is a great cross-sell opportunity. I mean, both PPC and social media are, in my opinion, if you're heavily focused on SEO, particularly because SEO takes so long to work for those really valuable traffic terms. These are great programs to be running that have much more immediate, tangible deliverables and give you an opportunity for engagement and discussion and real results while that SEO is percolating. I mean, we all know the long-term return on SEO is great, but we also know, we've talked about it many times in this series, that patience can run thin if you're paying for something month over month and you're not seeing that immediate gratification. These 2 programs that Chad's outlined both will take care of that. So sold as a bundle, I think it's very powerful, particularly when it's all wrapped up in our technology.
And Adam, I did look at my price sheet. It's $249 is the reseller rate. We are doing for $199. We had a setup fee that we had envisioned to set up some of the Facebook profiles, but we are currently, like you said, we're waiving that to just to make this attractive and get people in. But the setup of any unclaimed Twitter, if someone has a Twitter page or a handle, an account already, we'll take over the management of that. If they don't have one, we'll do a basic setup, which is one of the existing backgrounds in Twitter. And then if at some later date you want to go to town on a really fancy Twitter background, feel free to do that. We also can. We're working with looking at a couple other ways that we can add that service in. But it's $249 a month is the ongoing price, and the $199 is being waived as a setup fee for claiming and getting everything kind of hooked up correctly. So that's what we've got.
Great.
Okay, well, that's what I have for today, and we are a few minutes over, but Adam, were there any other questions or
I think we hit them all. I just want to thank everybody for their participation today. It was great to have you along with us, and we're real excited about these programs. Hope you guys jump on them.
Thanks, everyone, and we will be sending out notification of our July webinars, and I hope everyone has a great 4th of July, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, enjoy the holiday, folks. We'll see you.